Good afternoon. Christopher Leon Johnson here. Sign in, right?
Oh, yeah.
Let me sign in, yeah. The book's on sale?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, you can't buy the books here?
Luke is inside, so I'll double check with him.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No problem. So this is a tour. So sorry about that, guys. It's kind of like came from a Zoom call with Lincoln Wrestler. I got kicked out of city council today, so I had to testify virtually, but it's all good. What can you do? That what you buy the show online? Like, come on. So we're here for this panel, and you have Leah Goodridge, you have Whitney Who, you have a few people here. So which one is Luke Yates? Oh, this is Luke Yates. Okay, good. Hello. How you doing? Hello. Hello. How you doing? These are reserved? The front row's reserved? Okay. I was making sure. Yeah, I'm here for. I already signed up online.
What's that?
I already signed up online. Yeah.
Are you not going to be disruptive?
No, I won't. I actually give. I think you know who I am, but I actually care about this stuff.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I actually came.
I only know you from when you're disruptive.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
Good to know that you are.
Yeah, I won't. There's no Q&As today, right? There are no Q&As, right?
I think there's a discussion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, I'm not here to be that today. I'm not you can call me every name in the book, but I'm not. He's here to show my support. Hello. So they're gonna go live. So you Mr. Luke Yates, correct? You Mr. Luke? Oh, yeah, no, you're Luke. So that was Luke. Oh, that's Luke right there. There you go. Hello. Hi, Mr. Yates. My name is Christopher. Your book's on sale right now? And you have the book?
I've sold out.
Oh.
But there's some flyers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought there was like a physical book you had here.
Sorry?
I thought it was a physical book.
No. So why are you filming? Can I ask?
No, I'm just saying. I like to document everything I do. I'm a documentarian.
Okay.
I'm a documentarian. So yeah.
So
It's on YouTube.
well, I don't think we've got a filming like policy here. So I think why.
Oh, you
why
can't.
come to film?
Because I'm here to show my support. See what it's about. I like to document stuff and keep it so I can go back to just in case I forget things. That's my thing.
Okay.
I'm media too. That's
So
me.
what's your name?
I'm a journalist. I'm on YouTube, Facebook,
Okay.
Twitter.
Yeah. Where can I find you?
Yeah, Christopher Leon Johnson, CHRI. You should subscribe me right now
I will do. I will.
on YouTube. You see my beautiful face on YouTube.
Hang on, let me.
Nice on YouTube. I love YouTube.
Christopher.
Leon Johnson.
Oh yeah, you come up.
Yep, that's me on X.
Okay.
That's me on Instagram. That's me on LinkedIn. That's on Twitter. I have a little.
Oh,
That's
great.
me in a nutshell.
Okay, nice.
Yep.
So what's your stuff on usually? Like,
I do politics, activism,
okay.
nonprofits, everything like that. It's everything in a nutshell.
Well, so I'll give you one of these.
Yeah.
I've got the book with me.
Oh yeah.
Sold out of it.
Sold out. Wow. I'm
Yeah.
event. Okay, cool. Damn. I wish I could buy the book online. I like buying books in person. So it's $26.75. You use half off. It's like $13, right?
Yeah, something like that.
That's
yeah.
not bad. That is not bad. Huh. Yeah, everything like that. Yep.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. So you will see me on X. I like to go. Welcome. Yeah, I'm not gonna disrupt. Like, yeah, I actually care about this shit. One, I care about this shit. Two, hello, I care about this stuff. And two, I'm not here. This is a college. Well, public street is kind of different. I'm not like other people that I'm not like other people that go out and disrupt and say, I can't read. I'm not known for that. Let me go outside for a second. I don't like that. I'm sick here. So this starts tonight. Like, the fuck? Oh, you gotta be shitting me. Thank God, like, that's all your court. Cause there's no, see, had no fucking say no in this motherfucker. Oh, now it's signal. I ain't taking no shot. Let me see this CUNY shit work. Sorry about that. And funny, they got a recorder thing right there. I ain't taking no shot. Cause the problem with people is like, you record shit, you can't trust people. So you gotta trust yourself.
Yes, they said,
Well, good point. Shasta, go to previous on the astrolabe, you mean?
yeah, well, you write about the Milky Way, isn't it? One of the first mentions of the galaxy is in Shasta. It says that lo, the whole galaxy, which man referred to as the Milky Way, or it is light.
Yeah.
I know that because I've got a podcast to sleep, which is about different stuff. So you just have all these weird things in your brain that you've learned.
There you go. 929-760-4330. I was there since like 5 o'clock. I came over uptown. So you heard it, 660-4330. T-Mobile.
But no, I appreciate everything. I mean, I feel like you're one of the few folks out there who's like putting out messaging them consistently. Like, thank you guys. Yeah.
You can turn the shutter off. Sorry about that.
These are these quotes that I've missed from the interviews. So it's put them up in some places, which was kind of fun. But I've done it because it felt like the wrong kind of space. I didn't imagine people going around it. This is, things like this. Just quotes from oh, sorry. Quotes from which side? This one. Yeah, so doing a little exhibition.
Look at this shit.
Wander around and read stuff on
Where are you off?
That's Manchester.
Oh, wow, okay.
Actually, I need to.
Well, that's right, your flight's at like 9, right? 11, okay.
Yeah, so I've got a taxi down there. Yeah, JFK. How would you go about getting a taxi at that time?
You could use,
Right.
you could
It's like a text.
What's the, there's, there is a, you can use Curve.
That's it. Oh, right.
It's, you can actually call a New York City taxi app with Curve.
All right. Okay.
If you're in the outer boroughs, you can't do it, but since we're in like Harlem, Manhattan, you'll be able to call it.
Okay. So I need to download.
Curve. C-U-R-V.
Okay.
So yeah.
I was like, whenever I'm in Manhattan, I do try to use Curve. I try. And whenever I'm at the airport, I use a taxi there. Sadly, I can only give you $5 off. It's the only program. But you know what? 5 off is better than 0 off.
All right.
If you're coming from Manhattan, yeah, because I've noticed, I think it's actually better to use Curve because it like sends it. Versus, you know, like with the meter running, you can get it up there. How much am I actually paying? I heard there's more.
Gotta upload this stuff. 15, 25. Yeah, I gotta not go live or because there's no fucking signal here.
It's usually gonna take me like 5-10 minutes more, but if we have time to wait, like, we usually run out of time. And then for, it's easier to get those to you. Because at least the app they can accept it versus, yeah. Granted, I live like Kensington and Bay Ridge, so
Yeah,
usually,
uptown now. I'm gonna be fucking here.
if I'm not there last. That was the best part of during the taxi workers strike. The workers were so sweet and they would be like, and a lot of them lived nearby me, so they would just give me yeah, all my tools. Yeah, we usually have that often in the back. Are you so? What's that?
Yeah, this is from years ago.
Oh, to the eye people? Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, I'll have.
Thank you.
Yeah, we ended up in Queens.
I know.
One of the plazas, and I'm like, wait, what?
Honestly, kind of regret.
I know.
What were you looking at?
This book. I was reading the chapter on Airbnb, and I was like, oh my god, this is ruining my life right now. Hey, dude. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, this is like literally all you told me to do. It's just literally. So, yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah, so I will.
If you're really concerned, or if you have somebody you really like that you like to annoy, I think I'm struggling a bit with fantasy. I'm struggling with fantasy.
Oh.
Okay, that, okay, fine. Well,
Struggling how?
I understand DSA, like, I think, yes, we should challenge her, I just think it should be a black.
Well, yeah, there's some, yeah, there's some. a full-on effort. Like, I know you first, and then like after you didn't like, we literally think like at that point, like except for that. I know. No, you're not. I know.
By the way, I was out here this morning, shit right now. So do all this shit this morning is fucking crazy. It's like I kicked out of city council for shit I didn't even fucking do. But that's how it is, right? That's how it is with Christopher Leon Johnson, right? Fucking fucking hilarious. This is me since like 7 o'clock in the morning, but I think God works in mysterious ways, right? So yeah, I'm not here to disrupt. Actually, it was like, okay, you come out for this. Still, I'm not tired, but this is what you gotta do. You know what I'm saying?
Marie's dog is sick. Yeah. But Marie is.
Yeah, that's the thing with Caban. Yeah, they didn't even show up. Like I said before, I mean, the panel that they did not support Donald Trump. Eric supports Trump, and Eric supports Donald Trump, and Trump is Donald Trump, and
Yeah, I had to start time at 6:15, and Ligia from WJP.
yeah, it's a Monday evening. Yeah, 6:01 right now. So today I was at, let me put this right here. So today I was at City Hall, and and what happened was I was out there all day helping out Raul. Like Raul came like last second. We testified, I testified, he testified. There was a City Hall again. We got kicked out. I got kicked out for something Raul did. It's fucking. I think it was like, at the end of the day, it was like. I think it was bullshit, but it's something like they didn't kick me out in the morning because I could have got kicked out that morning because I crashed the taxi, the IDG bullshit, but then when Raul crashed it, they thought that I was coordinating him, but the cameras could say, like I said, I had my own camera, like I didn't tell him to do that shit, but like I said, I think he was kind of right that the eyes on the sky will say otherwise. I mean, I was hit with him all the time, and shit builds up, and then it's perception, right? I work at Eastport Security, so I know about that. So I take an L, but I'm not mad because it's fucking far. Take the 3 train to the 1 from City Hall. That's like an hour, and if I got here late, and I'm not the type of person late, I got here early. I had to use the restroom, and yeah, something like that. So that's the. Yeah, this was last week with the Worker Justice Project with the fucking with the what do they call this? With the deliberate, I had to make up the testimony from Monday, from today, from Friday because it's whatever. What happens? I mean, I think it was my fault for that, but it happens. You know what I'm saying.
Like, I would never ask, I don't I would give you every enforcement that I just for like revenge or something, and I'm like,
So I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here to show my support. Sorry, it's on Instagram. Right, this is my Twitter right here. It's CHRISLEJOHNYC. So. That's my account, and this is my YouTube account. I'll show you right now. Sorry, so that was a long ass hearing, by the way. Yeah, sure. I gotta do the live stream later. All right, so this is it right here. And this is my account, Christopher Leon Johnson. This is my fate. I love Hate 56, by the way. Sorry. So I was out here this morning. It just like, yeah, Lincoln was there. Like, but it's all right. You know what I'm saying? So over there is Whitney Hill, Leah Goodridge, and someone from the Housing Justice for All, something like that. But there's a lot of nonprofits that sponsor this thing today. She's from Brooklyn, New York. So this morning, this afternoon, let's see here, guys. This is kinda, yeah. So this afternoon, I wasn't out. I think they, because I didn't disrupt anything this morning. Some IDG's bullshit, but I didn't disrupt anything. I was like recording Raul when he crashed the shit, and then because they think I was going to do something next, and that wasn't the case. I mean, I'm not that stupid, but I had things to do. So this is a long day. I usually don't do type of shit like this, but this is my account. Sorry. By the way, I love this. This is one of my favorite albums, Cannibal Corpse, A Skeletal Domain, Metal Blade Records. So if you hear that song, yeah, it was an eventful day. And today, like I said, when it comes to taxi stuff, I really have no real. I just say my stance is like, stop beefing. Hello, like stop beefing. That's my stance. Is stop beefing. My stance is to stop beefing. It's not to be divided and shit. I never got like, okay, you're divided. You guys are divided. Like TWA and Taxi Workers Alliance, they're both divided on this shit, but they're the same ones that being wrongfully deactivated by the apps, including Worker Justice Project, and what's the other nonprofit? Fucking Justice with App Workers. They both be unfairly deactivated by the apps, and it's like, okay, like what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? It's just like, come on, man. So it just like I just had to like be fair and like, okay, let me just say this because it is like whatever. I didn't want to just. And today I want to, before I hopefully they start like 7 minutes, is that about this thing with at the hearing League of Wrestler, right? So there was like a trans identifier person that was complaining to the apps about a wrestler about all the nonprofit heads and all the policy directors and policy advisors and lobbyists spoke before the regular folk. But yeah, like the thing is that because that's how it is. That's how I say, yo, when in the city council, the way it is, it's like the way it goes is like, okay, they do the agencies, then they will, if it depends on the situation, right? They'll let all the agencies speak first, then they let the union heads speak, then they let the big, like library, it's like they let certain, and then they let all the nonprofits, all the lobbyists, all consultants speak, and then they let the regular people speak. And the funny thing I could say, is that they give all the nonprofits and all the people that they really close with all the time to speak, but when it comes to the people that are regular folk and the people they give like, it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And then they keep. Yeah, I'm gonna record this because these fuckers be like, the problem with people, they like to live stream and they don't fucking publish it. I'm like, I never got that because they scared people picking shit up and they don't watching this stuff. So it's like, I don't want to keep to my side, so because I like to document. I like to document. Just whatever. So TA was out here just after all day pushing the daylight and stuff. Yeah, I'm not, like I said, I support it, but I said, look, you gotta at least put it at like at least 10 feet. You know what I'm saying? 20 feet is not going to fucking work. That's the problem. You know what I'm saying? Because the problem 20 feet is that's like 2 parking spots. You know what I'm saying?
Getting a little charge for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, that's a good. I thought they were gonna do inside the auditorium, some shit like that, but it's what it is. Just put it in the middle. The middle is better. Yeah, that's better.
I think a little bit farther back.
Put it, yeah, like that. Yeah. If you have an iPhone, do it horizontally. You're better because you get the full frame.
So I think we start in like 5 minutes. Great. Okay, cool.
Hello. Thank you. Yeah, I had to like fucking. Somebody said thank you for saying that. It just like I'm not here to be the voice of reason, but sometimes you gotta be the voice of reason. It's just like the shit that it's a shit with TWA and WJP and Open IDG. All these fucking organizations that is fighting for deliveristas and for higher based workers. What do they call this shit? And they divided. They're really fucking divided. And the problem people gotta say, look, it's stop fucking being divided. And like I said, you only can say so much in 2 minutes. And I had things to do. And like I said, God works in mysterious ways. But it's like. All right. Yeah, just like whatever with this bullshit. You know what I'm saying? 2025. But so right now they gonna have a panel. I just saw this on the page, and let me just go here and see what this shit's about. Bored in my house. I'm gonna be in my house all day loading this shit. Might as well come out. So the 6:15 right now. There's a good amount of people there. I mean, it's Monday. Mondays are like not the best days to do events, but because it's like the day where everybody has to make up from the weekend, Friday. So. Yeah. So 20 feet is like two.
Okay, should we go ahead?
Yeah, I want to wait. Wendy, you want to wait till someone he put the phone on? He start recording something like that?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go find the
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi. Yes. 1, 2. That sounds okay. Yeah.
I can do that? Okay. Alright, guys, sorry, I talked to the instructors. If you can, why don't we just kind of take a few rows up? I promise we don't fight. I can't make promises about spitting on me. Just feel free to move on forward. Just makes it a little bit more intimate. Alright, we're gonna get started. So hi everybody, my name is Whitney. I am the Director of Civic Engagement and Research for Churches United for Fair Housing. And we're one of the many organizations that are part of Tenants, Not Tourists. We're so glad you can join us tonight for this conversation on the growing power of technology platforms and the communities that are fighting back. Before we dive in, I want to thank CUNY for hosting us here in North Academic Center Ballroom, and in particular, and giving a big thank you to Professor John Krinsky, Director of Community Change Studies, for his support in making tonight possible. And John, if you'd like to say a few words to kick us off.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'll make it short. Most of you know me, if not everybody. So the main thing I just want to do is just welcome everybody on behalf of the Community Change Studies program at City. And what we do is we connect students with the world of community organizing in New York through classes, through internships, and through fellowships, which actually bring organizers and leaders onto campus to take our classes alongside our students. So really happy we were able to make this happen and make it happen actually. Thank you, Simati, for bringing a class, a community organizing class, because this is really, I think this will be a really interesting panel for looking at exactly the kinds of things that are going on the ground right now. So thank you.
Cool. So I just want to take a real quick moment to frame why we're here. So Tenants Not Tourists is a grassroots coalition of tenants, housing advocates, and community groups from across the city who came together to respond to a crisis, the explosion of illegal short-term rentals that were taking apartments off the market and driving up rents for working class New Yorkers. We fought hard and won to pass Local Law 18, which was a landmark law that has returned over 10,000 homes to the long-term housing market and given thousands of tenants a shot at staying in their neighborhoods. But we also know that the fight isn't over. Airbnb and its allies are still running misinformation campaigns, lobbying legislators, and trying to weaken enforcement, all while tenants are still struggling with skyrocketing rents and displacement pressures. And it's not just Airbnb, platforms across the economy, whether it's rideshare companies, delivery apps, or short-term rental sites, are using the same playbook. Heavy lobbying, PR spin, and even fake grassroots campaigns to resist regulation and protect their profits. So we're going to zoom out tonight and see the bigger picture, how these fights connect across cities and across sectors, and how we can build a power to win not just one wall, but lasting housing and labor justice. So with that context, I'm really excited to introduce our keynote guest tonight, Luke Yates. Luke is a sociology professor at the University of Manchester and the author of Platform Politics, a groundbreaking book that investigates how some of the most powerful companies in the world operate not just as businesses, but as political actors. His research digs into the way these platforms spend millions of dollars on lobbying, launch PR campaigns to frame themselves as good neighbors or job creators, and even build fake grassroots networks to influence public opinion. What's so striking about Luke's work is how it connects circles across cities, showing that what's happening in New York is a part of a global pattern and that there are lessons to be learned from victories elsewhere. So please help me in welcoming Luke to share insights from Platform Politics and set the stage for our conversation tonight.
Thanks, Whitney. Thanks, John. Thanks to everyone else who's made this event possible. Thank you to all of you for coming. So I'm just going to launch straight in. I'm talking about a book. If anyone would like a book, I've actually not got any with me, but you can get a flyer for a discounted version from the front here or on the way in. So my starting point for the book is around digital lean platforms. So platforms like Airbnb, Uber, Doordash, platforms which don't have assets and but which make their money from connecting, in some sense, suppliers with customers or owners with buyers or renters in some form or another. So I'm looking at this subset of platforms that increasingly they're kind of becoming part of our everyday lives. So they're part of our neighbourhoods, they're part of the way that we get around in terms of personal transportation, they're part of the way that we eat, the way that we supply meals to each other. And there's some positives that come out of this, but there's also a lot of negatives around the intensification of precarious work in relation to gig economy businesses. And there's also a lot of evidence that suggests that increased numbers of Airbnbs also push up rents and make it harder for people to live in the neighbourhoods that they're from, make it harder for people to live long-term in cities like New York City. And I'm talking about this book in a number of different places in North America. I've been to Toronto, Montreal, New Orleans, and Mexico City, and it's been really interesting talking to organisers in each of those cities and sort of working out what the sort of situation is on the ground for organisers facing challenges around technologies and I guess the impact that they have on neighbourhoods and working conditions. So my core question is, how do platform businesses try and shape our societies? But I'm interested as well in the kind of discussion of kind of what have we learnt about tech power and tech politics in New York City, and what are the implications of that? What are the implications for people who are interested in organising against and around platforms? I also kind of want to think a little bit about other tech struggles. I think we'll probably mainly talk about Airbnb. I think there's a lot of people interested in housing here, but there's other platforms too where I think some of these implications are probably important to discuss. So before I kind of go to that, there's a URL here which is for the tour itself, and the tour has been put together just by community organisers working in different cities, and we don't have any sort of central funding. So if anyone can afford to donate even just a few dollars to the tour, that allows us to do more events like this. So a little plug, even if it's a small thing, that would be really wonderful. Thank you. So the first part of my argument is around needing to contradict this story that we are probably familiar with from media, but also the platforms, that digital platforms are in some way inevitable, that they're this kind of all-powerful wave of technological progress that represents modernity in some way, that machines transform everything into whatever the CEOs of those companies want. But all the evidence suggests the contrary, that political interactions, political struggles determine how these platforms look in different cities. So Uber doesn't exist in a number of major economies around the world. Airbnb looks very, very different in different cities. And that's always down to the level of grassroots movements in a city, the kind of where the governments are critical, whether there's regulation which is proposed. Platforms alone don't change things. They change things in collaboration with other actors or against other actors. But this said, the second part of my argument is that even though that you have all these differences across different cities, there are common tactics that the platforms use to try and avoid regulation or try and shape regulation in the way that they want. And I'm going to mainly be focusing on these tactics. But before I do that, I want to say something about how I understand those tactics. And the tactics of platforms are divided into sort of three moments, I argue in the book. So the first one is about arrival and expansion. So when Airbnb and Uber arrived, they sort of just landed. Nobody quite asked for them, but suddenly they were everywhere. There were people riding around with big boxes on their backs. There were Uber drivers everywhere. And this took a lot of people by surprise, and took city authorities by surprise, because there wasn't really a process of sort of discussion with local governments or communities. There was a sort of landing on us, an experience of just suddenly kind of arriving and becoming part of their everyday lives. And I thought maybe the way that AI is kind of creeping into every app that I use at the moment is similar to that. WhatsApp is offering me relationship advice. It's offering to tell me jokes. And I just want a message with it. But AI is in everything now, isn't it? I'm offered an AI summary of nearly every document that I read, etc. So these technologies become part of our everyday lives, and there's a political element to that because they become sort of convenient to us, and they become part of what we understand to be normal. And that's important because of the second moment, which is that there's often a kind of a challenge. So taxi drivers or housing advocates or people who are concerned by the kind of effects of these businesses have challenged them increasingly in the last kind of 10 years particularly. And that level of that sort of the intimacy that we have, kind of the way that apps are kind of part of almost everything we do, you know, the way we get around, the way that we travel, the way that we stay somewhere, is then something which platforms use to mobilize those users against the idea of regulation. So this is mainly what I'm going to talk about today, but it's that mobilization of users and allies in a way that resembles grassroots politics, that is something quite distinctive that platforms have been doing. And then the kind of third stage, which I won't talk about very much today, but I think is probably relevant for New York as well, is about enforcement. So it isn't just about passing regulations, it's also about how you get those regulations enforced. And that's been a real challenge for different governments in relation to platforms. I'm going to zoom in now onto this kind of particular tactic. So in the last 10 years, platforms have continued to expand, but the conversation's really changed. So if you just think about the way we talk about even Google now compared to 10 years ago, the kind of primary colours of Google, it was seen as a sort of a friendly, fluffy business which could not really do much wrong. But sort of fast forward to now, and I think we have a really different discussion about platforms and about technology. And that's come with a lot of challenges to them, a lot of critical governments and a lot more movements that are opposing them. And what I'm looking at is how platforms respond to those tactics. So these are kind of tactics to try and neutralise grassroots challenges to tech power. And authors have highlighted this role of the mobilisation of platforms' own users and allies in a kind of grassroots-like approach, which has sometimes been called astroturfing. And that's been seen across Uber, Airbnb, and food delivery platforms all over the world. So I'm going to zoom in on kind of how these tactics work. Say something about the research behind the book. The main case study is Airbnb's strategy to mobilise users and allies to shape public opinion. They've called that at different points Airbnb Citizen, Host Clubs, and Home Sharing Clubs. And I also looked at some other platforms as well, through newspaper analysis, secondary analysis, and so on. And I spoke to ex-Airbnb employees who worked in 14 different countries. Around half of them worked in the United States, and I think 2 of them were working in New York City. And these ex-Airbnb employees often held the role of community organizer, and they had been recruited often from the Obama campaigns of 2008, 2012. So they'd done community organizing for the Democrat Party in this kind of professional setting, and then had been kind of recruited into the corporate world through Airbnb. And the people that I was speaking to were often working for other tech companies, other Silicon Valley companies, usually with the same kind of job title. So they were also calling themselves community organizers or mobilization specialists, something like this. So they're using the language you're familiar with, but in quite a different way, in quite a different context. So the next couple of slides just present some of the anonymised data from the case study to give you a flavour of what this corporate mobilisation looks like and kind of how effective it is, or not always how effective it is actually, because I think it does backfire sometimes. This story is not one of tech power, vanquishing all its opponents because it's prepared to do anything. It's actually much more. It's a bit more complicated than that. In cities like New York, often these kinds of mobilisations, people sort of know or sense what they're about, and they don't have the same traction. But that's not always true. I'd be interested in knowing what people here, how successful you think that they have been in New York. So this slide is about who's participating in these Airbnb mobilisations. So who's involved in them, and it's the landlords, it's the Airbnb landlords who are participating, and the process through which they participate is Airbnb trawls through profile details of landlords, which incidentally they don't provide in order to be politically mobilised, but they provide in order to be able to work on the platform. But hosts receive phone calls from organisers asking them to sign petitions or email politicians in quite large numbers. And then certain hosts tend to be targeted for having particular kinds of profiles. So if you are a host who doesn't have many listings and you're not really a commercial host, you're in a minority on the platform. You're probably about 8% of the number of listings globally, and a very, very small proportion of the revenue of the company. But you're very, very important for Airbnb because you are the face of the home sharing community. So for those particular people, they were recruited, they were invited to meetings, and asked to participate in increasingly political ways. So things like testifying in hearings, speaking to the media, meeting with politicians, and so on. So I asked all ex-Airbnb employees whether they recruited people with more than one listing, and they all said no, they weren't interested in those hosts. And Anthony from the Midwest actually laughs out loud when I ask him and says, no, we're not looking for people who are looking to get Airbnb legalised, who have 1 million apartments doing it as a business. And this is significant because the actual home sharers, or the people who have one listing, or perhaps just part of their house that they're renting out, would often say something, Airbnb staff told me, they would often say things about the problem being these commercial these commercial landlords, they're the issue. So this was a problem, and they had to kind of keep hosts almost quite tightly on message. But it wasn't just a matter of finding people with just the right kind of profile. There was always a process around recruitment, and trust building, and training, which is quite intensive. So Annie from the West Coast describes this process of recruitment. She says, the first meeting we would bring them to our office. This is the first kind of like a first date, basic chit chat. Where are you from? Where am I from? I'd love to invite you to this event. We're not asking anything of you right now. The next meeting is most likely in their home, if they're open to that. This is when we start asking more second, third, or fourth date questions. What is your relationship with your parents like? What's the hardest thing that you've been through? So the level of in a sense, quite intrusive questions, but it's about building a rapport with landlords in order to be able to establish trust, because these landlords sort of need to engage in quite a lot of political activity, effectively on behalf of the company, on behalf of themselves to a certain extent, but really on behalf of the company. So that relationship between the Airbnb organizer and the host activist is really important. And a lot of emotional labour kind of went into it. And this slide is about the relationship between Airbnb and the landlord activists. So this is kind of crucial, because if you're a journalist or a counsellor or just a normal member of the public, you don't really know how seriously to take a protest that's in support of a company, or a bunch of landlords protesting outside City Hall. You don't really know what it is. You can't quite make sense of it. And that lack of transparency also comes from Airbnb's public-facing materials, which are completely silent about the company's role in mobilising landlords. So this is the FAQ document which existed at one point, which said, how is Airbnb affiliated with home sharing clubs? These clubs are of the hosts, by the hosts, and for the hosts. So there's a sort of sense that they're independent of the company. The FAQs document was taken down a couple of months after my book was published, but there's a similar document now online which says makes a similar kind of point. It says these groups are about hosts getting together, learning how to host better, sharing. It's very ambiguous. So Anthony, in the first quote, sort of starts to give us a bit more of a sense of what that relationship between the company and the landlords is. He says that Airbnb staff actually made the placards for landlords to hold in demonstrations organised by the company, which Airbnb staff would also attend. Noah describes the process of discussing with landlords what they should say in their supposedly personal testimony in court hearings and consultations. He says a lot of people say stupid shit because they don't know the smart shit to say, so they'll just take their story and be like, instead of emphasising this, why not emphasise this instead? We think that would be more powerful, and they'll just go along with it. So there's a sense in which you might have a story if you're a landlord, but it might not be the story that Airbnb are looking for. And if it isn't, then you will be helped to create or edit that story into something which will be a bit more persuasive. And the last quote I think that I want to read is I think it's kind of one of the fascinating findings for me. It was how critical many of these former Airbnb staff were of the work that they had been asked to do and that they had done on behalf of the company, sometimes for 5 years, sometimes 6, 7 years. So Kate, who was working in California, said, Airbnb really should not have been able to have a campaign like that. It raises this question of if in a campaign one side has every resource and is all hired guns, and then the other side is random community activists, and then people are out to vote on that. That's not democracy. So kind of zoom out a little bit, last slide or two. I just want to say Airbnb's sort of reliance on these commercial landlords, it's something which is completely hidden by the cherry picking of home sharers. And I guess a kind of question that ties to is, what is the best way of challenging a story like that? If you have a kind of a face of the company which is not really at all representative, how do you talk to and understand those, this very small proportion of landlords? The kind of second point I want to make as well is around this astroturfing. It is a known repertoire, but it's mainly been used in tobacco and fossil fuel, for tobacco and fossil fuel companies. Platforms are really building on this, using people's personal data. That's quite new, and they've globalized it. It's something. Astroturfing was something that was mainly only used in North America until very recently, and platforms are using these kinds of tactics all over the world. Okay, the last slide, and I think this is kind of some stuff that we're going to talk about in the panel, so I won't labour it, but I'm going to highlight just maybe the first and the last point, which is this is around kind of what do we need? How should we think about regulating as a society? How should we think about dealing with platforms that bring these problems around housing, working, employment rights, and so on? And I think one of them is that we need a vision beyond the kind of regulation element. We need to kind of think about what a platform that was democratically controlled would look like. What happens sort of after you get to the point where there are no illegal Airbnbs and where gig economy workers are sort of treated as fairly as workers. So I think you have to think a little bit beyond that. There's a kind of range of other bits and bobs on the slide here, which I think we'll probably come back to. But the last one, I think I want to say because it's kind of salient for me working in the UK. Sometimes it's about looking out for or waiting for the right moment. So, and that means not always necessarily protesting, not always doing that kind of work, and sometimes building, sometimes making alliances, sometimes creating the kinds of relationships that you need for struggle. So that's my last thing. If you want to email me, you can. And again, that's the URL for if you'd like to donate a few dollars as well. But thank you so much for listening, and I'm really interested to know what your kind of experiences of this stuff are in your city. Thanks very much.
Okay, cool. We'll just go ahead and get started. So we actually have a moderator who's coming, but she's coming from Brooklyn, so she'll be here in a second alongside another panelist. But I'll go ahead and introduce Sandy, so when she comes here, she can just roll up, and then we can maybe just get started with some questions. So thank you, Luke. That was, I would say great, but at the same time horrifying, so that was lovely. First, so when she shows up, we can give her a big round of applause. We have Council Member Sandy Nurse. She represents District 37 in Brooklyn and is a champion for housing justice, workers' rights, and climate resilience. She's also the co-chair of Progressive Caucus. So we're excited to have her moderate. Real fast, show of hands, how many of you have used Airbnb? You're not in trouble. I've used it, I will confess. All right, how many of you have used Uber, Doordash, Uber Eats, Seamless Grubhub? Y'all got Grubhub money? I'm joking. I didn't have Grubhub money when I was in college. Wait, what are some other apps? Postmates. Does Postmates still exist? Am I old? Oh, thank you. I was like, am I old? Do they still exist? What are the other apps that are, Instacart. Amazing. Yeah, but they're suing workers right now. Did you know that? Instacart. Oh, Shipt. Amazon.
And I do think that Luke includes OnlyFans as well in that leading platform. So, I mean, no, it's yeah, not going to show of hands, but you know.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Sandy's going to be here in 10 minutes, so you're going to get me for the interim. So I'm going to do a quick round of introductions, introduce you to folks who are on stage. So first up, we have, oh, actually, I don't know, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Would that be easier? Esteban? Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey y'all, my name is Esteban Giron. I am a member of the Tenant Union and also newly political director of Tenant's Political Action Committee. I have been working in the tenant movement for 11 years. Primarily, my work has been through the Tenant Union, doing everything from coalition work to legislative work, lobbying, but also just like going building to building and organizing buildings, land use, community board stuff, like anything that's going to eventually affect tenants. And so through Tenant Stack was introduced to this Airbnb work, and found myself at a hearing for a local live team a few years ago. This is a really, really big issue in central Brooklyn, particularly in Crown Heights and Bed-Stuy. The change in the past 2 years has been crazy. Like the not seeing of people running around with suitcases like they used to. And so like we have a lot of incentive to fight for for the regulation of this company. So I've gotten into this work, and happy to be here, happy to be a part of Tenants Not Tourists, which has been a really interesting experience.
Hi, I'm Leah Goodridge, and I practice as a tenants' rights attorney at local nonprofits for 12 years. And so people who are getting evicted for various reasons, I represented them in housing court. Let me just mention, I don't take any housing questions after the panel, so This is how you call it, like, oh, yeah, girl. I was formerly on the Red Guidelines Board, and I am from Brooklyn. And I wanted to add that when I told folks that I was going to be on this panel, and I listed out, I was like, yeah, Airbnb, like, yeah. And then I was like, Uber and Doordash, and they were like, oh, okay, girl, what's going on? You know, there's, at least, you know, being from New York City, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and you could not get a cab in New York City if you were black, or, you know, if you didn't think pass this brown paper bag test, you could not get a cab in New York City. So there are a lot of people who were diehard Uber fans because of this history in New York City and not being able to like hail one of those yellow cabs. So these are the conversations I was having. And then also, you know, with Doordash, like people will bring up like disability advocacy. So I really love that we are having this conversation because I don't, you know, it's not like a black and white thing. And I think we do have a lot of New Yorkers who just, you know, as many of us raise our hands, it's also like, okay, tell me why I should hate like these companies. So I think this is a really fruitful conversation.
Awesome. So just so folks know, we're going to do a panel for about 40 minutes and then we'll go into a Q&A. So folks are going to have time to like ask their own questions, so definitely be thinking. The final person who's going to join is going to actually be Ligia Guallpa, who is the Executive Director for Workers' Justice Project, where she organizes immigrant and gig workers to win better pay, protections, and recognition, including a recent victory against Doordash in order to like better compensate their delivery workers. And you know, and I just want to maybe even set like a framing, like even with like local law 18, like nothing with that law did we actually change housing law. What we changed was enforcement of said housing law. And I think what we're seeing a lot of is like more like folks, like there are regulations that have been created and a lot of like startups and what's supposed to call startups coming in and like not abiding by those. And so it is like an interesting like line to walk. So I'm gonna ask the first question. Luke just did that great overview and framework. So for New York City folks, how do you see all of these tactics showing up most recently and more clearly, and how have these corporate campaigns influenced fights that you've been a part of? I know you guys started talking about that already.
Yeah, so on the way here, I was trying to register the entire chapter on Airbnb in the book, and it was play by play every single tactic that we've seen over the past year and a half, and even as it's happening now. It's crazy how much they're sticking to the playbook, and so I think it's like I'm kind of like floored that I hadn't seen that before because it's like stuff that we need to know. But we've been facing these like astroturf groups that claim to be homeowner groups or community groups. They've got some pretty heavy hitting sponsors like NAACP chapters and folks that have some credibility in certain parts of the business community, and have been painted essentially as ourselves stooges of the hotel industry. That's supposedly what we're in this for. And so, yeah, I think most of what we've done is like correct misinformation. Like that's like even the whole concept of what Local Law 18 did, which is just created a registry that forced Airbnb to take listings somewhere upwards of 17,000 listings off of their page for laws that already existed. So all of this effort that Airbnb is doing, and it's at this point like a $15 million effort just so far this year to claw back that law. They would still be back to the point where they have to go further and get rid of laws that already exist. So like, it's not like they're making things legal by doing their campaign. They're actually just going back to where they could do it illegally instead. And so all of that is sort of obfuscated. You've probably seen like, they're literally everywhere right now. They're on every Instagram feed. They're just like, they're called right now homeowners for financial empowerment. You've seen that. or a group called Roar, which is also another front group, and it's literally exactly the stuff that Luke was writing about, just with a different name. And so, so I think that they are, in some ways, really underestimating how much people can see through that stuff. And if you go into the comments on any of their Instagram, like they had to actually turn off all their comments on Instagram because they were getting roasted hard, like really, really bad. And so it's interesting to, it's interesting, and I think this is really something that the housing movement overall has been paying attention to, and needs to do more so. They're coming with the state level stuff next year. Like they already promised to spend just as much money on trying to pass different laws at the state level that would then affect New York City properly. So, so it's a very active, it's a very active fight right now. Feel a little over my head.
Yeah, so let me talk specifically about Airbnb, and let me answer the question, why, what is wrong with Airbnb? Why should we have like a lack of trust here? So having practiced for many years, one of the main things is when people are getting evicted, you've got to find another apartment and preferably a cheaper one. And right now, or even for the last couple of years, if you go out to look for an apartment, I have to tell people this, and this is how I know that someone has stayed in their apartment for the last 5 years or more. If you haven't been out in the housing market for the last 5 years or more, let me tell you the difference. 5 or 7 years ago, if you went out and you saw an apartment you liked, you could mull on it for like a day or two and then get back to the person, right? And be like, all right, I think, yeah, I want to do this. I want to go through the credit check of that. That's no longer happening right now. If you see an apartment right now, first of all, you're going to have less of a shot because more people are applying. So there's a lot more competition because there are a lot less units. There's a housing shortage. So there are a lot of people applying. So let's say you find one and you like it, you've got to let them know immediately. And I'm talking about within an hour, or else it's gone. So that is how bad the housing market is right now. And then on top of all of that, you've got to pay, this is until the broker's fee law came in, you had to pay the broker's fee. We were talking about $10,000 just to move into a New York City apartment, and it could have been the most affordable apartment ever, but it would cost you so much just to get it. So keep that in mind when I say, why are we talking about, for example, Airbnb? This is what the housing market is. This is a symptom of how much a housing shortage has changed the way that we live our life and how we can find housing. And so imagine now you have people who are putting these housing units up for like tourists, for short-term rentals, for short-term stays, when there are people who are getting evicted, they can't find something else, and this is part of that larger problem. One of the, and lastly, let me point out that one of the, I think, propaganda here is, very shortly after this law, and it's a restriction, not like a wholesale ban, right? There was a law passed here to restrict Airbnb with short-term, and that you have to register these properties, and that in of itself meant that thousands of less units were on the market, right? And shortly after that, now you had, then it was, oh, you know what? Okay, this law passed, and housing is still unaffordable in New York City. It's like, hold on. That's part of the propaganda. This is part of the propaganda because this is just one part. This is one part of the problem. It's not like the end-all solution. And by trying to sort of frame a narrative that, oh my goodness, it's been 6 months, or
the rents didn't go down.
The rents didn't go down. It's like, okay, it's one part of a solution, right? Or I think the language was, the rents did not significantly go down in the 5 million or however million apartments in your city. Like, this is also part of what we need to push back against because, again, aside from Airbnb, we also have landlords of rent-stabilized apartments who are not putting these apartments on the market purposely. There have been many news articles about this, and also they themselves are on TikTok talking about it, who are not putting their rent-stabilized units on the market because they feel like They want, it's in protest. They feel like they won't get money on it, so it's just off the market. So we have a huge problem here where there's definitely a demand. We have people who need housing, and we have the housing, but it's being used for other things. Either it's being warehoused, or it's being used for tourists, or people who are, just here for short term. So this is what, we need to talk about when we talk about the larger structural problem.
Shake that. I recently told a reporter, Airbnb saying that we haven't fixed the housing crisis. It's like the gas industry bad that electric cars hasn't fixed climate change. It's a drop in the bucket. Leah, thank you for being here. I would love, I did a little bit of introduction. I am very sure I did not do you justice in the work that you guys are doing. Would love for maybe if you could just take a second to explain that the work that you're doing, your Workers' Justice Project, the current, your recent win with Doordash and the fight that's coming up with you and the delivery status.
Yeah, I think very similar. What
Also, there's a mic if you want to,
Yeah, so don't you think that's how much energy I was saving for you all on my way here. Well, nice meeting you. My name is Ligia Guallpa. I am a organizer for almost a decade now, more than a decade actually, with Workers' Justice Project, which is a worker center that organizes low-wage workers. And since the beginning, we've been organizing gig workers, particularly like day laborers, domestic workers, and other workers that have worked in non-traditional jobs where they have few protections and where they're working either as independent contractors or doing gig work. And traditionally, that work has always been known as like day labor work. In 2020, since the pandemic, a lot of, I think, same from what we've seen in other industries, a lot of jobs are transforming because of technology, especially because of online platforms. And app delivery work happened to be one of those jobs. So one of those jobs, especially during 2020, there was a huge boom when it comes to demand, especially among New Yorkers, relying more on delivery as a way to survive and make ends meet. But that also meant that completely transformed the work of people who were doing delivery work, either working directly for the restaurants. So you had Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, these multi-billion-dollar corporations kind of seeing a huge market potential in New York and really pretty much trying to figure out how they can profit from a necessity, which is New Yorkers trying to get access to food and resources. And they've been growing. It wasn't new in 2020. They have been sort of experimenting and trying to like take off markets. But it was in 2020 where they pretty much like became the source of necessity for every New Yorker. And that was good for every New Yorker who needed to access food, groceries, but that wasn't really good for workers. So in New York, there's about, according to the CWP and some extra numbers, we're talking about 80,000 workers now that are subcontracted by Uber, Grubhub, and DoorDash. What these companies have done essentially is subcontracting as independent contractors is stripping away their basic labor protections, which means like they no longer have access to basically, they no longer have access to minimum wage, overtime, all these labor protections that we as workers take granted, they've been stripping away from them. And we started organizing in 2020, especially with a group of leaders that formed Los Deliveristas Unidos to confront the abuse that they were facing in 2020, since many of them actually were experiencing the most inhumane working conditions that any worker would have experienced, which is being denied access to a bathroom, earning about $8 an hour, working long shifts. Some of them, their tips were stolen. There were mistreatment happening from restaurant owners who now are no longer employed. So it was all different, plus dealing with street safety. And we started organizing to try to set some labor protections. And we were able to win some basic ones, but important and huge. New York was the first city in the country to set a minimum wage. So now the minimum wage for a deliverista is $21 an hour. And all of you will be like, that's great. That's probably more than what a $16 an hour, which is the New York State minimum wage. Not technically, because deliveristas are only paid for the time that they're actually working, from the time they pick up the delivery, from the moment they are making that delivery. They don't get to be fully compensated, actually not at all, for the time that they're actively waiting for those deliveries. They have access to decide the trip distance, but now they also have retaliated, meaning like if you don't set your distance at 5-10 miles, you don't get a lot of orders. Or if you get delayed in that order, now because the company knows that they have to pay you $21, and if you don't deliver in the 15-20 minutes, they deactivate you. They're creating scheduling systems, so you get better scheduling if you really like the fastest delivery, making as many deliveries as possible. So you get priorities. So they have created all these algorithm management and computer deciding who gets the best bids, who gets the best jobs, who gets the best schedule, and it's all based on performance. And performance is who's the deliverista that is going to be killing himself trying to make as many deliveries as possible. So right now, one of the most important bills that is going to address the entire crisis of street safety is going to create job security, and is actually going to make sure that the full implementation of a minimum wage can really bring meaningful economic equity to workers, is the deactivation, which actually our council member Sandy Nurse is co-sponsoring. And you know, we're organizing also, I think very similar to, and I'll end with this, with these platforms. Geez, they have so much money, so much. And they're trying to buy everything, right? Like from PR, from electoral campaigns, from mayoral race. They try to like run our democracy while selling a complete different narrative to consumers, because they know consumers are like one of the most important components. So that's why you will see all these companies making millions in advertising, trying to convince consumers to consume, while also investing millions in lobbying, PR, and trying to undermine any additional protection or regulation that is going to regulate the companies. But good luck in New York. We have good politicians and elected officials like our council member who will tell a little bit of what they're doing actually to combat these unscrupulous billion-dollar tech companies that are trying to pretty much exploit workers and trying to run our city.
Thank you so much, Michael. Submitting from running from the train, coming all the way from Brooklyn. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy. I'm a council member in Brooklyn. So pleased to be up here with you all. And I'm going to hop in for Whitney. So thank you so much for outlining that. And it's true, they have a ton of money, and they are willing to spend it on lying to New Yorkers and misleading campaigns. They're buying lobby firms, so many contracts, and not putting the money into figuring out how to support their workforce that actually makes them the wealth. So I'm going to bring Esteban into the conversation. You've been on the front lines fighting the short-term rentals. How are tenants directly feeling the effects of the platform, like Airbnb and VRBO in the neighborhoods? And if you want to talk a little bit about this kind of somewhat grassroots effort to push back against the law we passed.
Yes. So I got involved in this campaign in 2021, specifically because I was seeing these things that popped up in bodegas, like on every other block in Crown Heights. They were like, it was almost like a hotel front desk. So like the bodega was acting as like the key holders, and they also had like linens and stuff for the entire neighborhood. I forgot the name of the company, but I mapped them all out, and I took that and went to a city council hearing, and I was like, this is what's happening. Like, they're running hotels out of our neighborhood. And shortly after, we were able to pass local law 18, which again did not add any regulations. It just enforced the ones that had already existed. Airbnbs went from 22,000 listings to a little over 3,000 listings overnight on September 5th of 2023, 2 years ago. And the change was like immediate and radical. Like if you're in Brooklyn, like you saw it, like it was no more people dragging their suitcases. It was within the buildings, no longer having to like I mean, there was tourists in there every night. Like the buildings were like hotels, and the houses even worse. Like they were buying up full blocks of homes, and so and this was starting to create a real problem because we were seeing, as we were saying, like people would get evicted, and then you'd have this like revolving door of like not tenants in these units. Tons of rent stabilized. This was sort of happening at the same time that like the landlords were like doing their capital strike, which they was also talking about in terms of trying to like warehouse their apartments, and so a lot of landlords were just renting out completely illegally without any sort of consequences. And so this actually placed some consequences, and then there was sort of a lull. We thought the law was working well, and then suddenly it was like the millions of dollars started pouring in. The front groups like Roar and this homeowners financial empowerment started lobbying the speaker and different council members, specifically from Brooklyn and from out of boroughs, in black and brown neighborhoods, with very much the demographic that you're describing in the book, which is black and brown homeowners that are just trying to make ends meet, who are not really the people that are creating the money for them, but that's who they want as their face. And so we had to sort of reassemble as a new coalition, which included like Tenant's PAC, included Church United for Fair Housing, housing conservation coordinators, and then really like the rest of the tenant movement just sort of jumped in and supported because we had seen what this does. And also we had like examples from all over the world, like we in touch with people from Barcelona and from different parts of Europe and other cities in the United States, all going through the same thing. And so I think, in terms of what it's done for tenants, like there was like an immediate, all those units are not just like empty now. I think we've gotten some data within the past couple of weeks. Maria was showing us some data about how many units actually did come back online as long-term housing. At the same time, we saw that the people that were, the homeowners that were sort of leading this campaign had some really ugly ideas about who tenants are, and what, like, they don't want the tenants that are not, that are gonna have to take the housing board, and they're gonna have to try to evict because they won't, do what they want. Just like really ugly rhetoric, and making it clear that they did not want to deal with actual tenants. They wanted to deal with like tourists that have more money. Of course, you don't have to deal with rent civilization if you're doing Airbnb. So like all of those things are no longer, it's a huge headache for them to have to actually follow the rules. But that's what the law did. So now their effort kind of failed. I mean, like I think just like realistically speaking, that bill just kind of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so to add a little more like.
Yeah.
I mean, we had, particularly for my community, there was like a good mix of single black women who had raised their children and had these units open, and kind of new, more affluent white homeowners, right? And the framing of their campaign was autonomy. Like they wanted autonomy of their property, as if they don't exist in the context of New York City. And we hadn't even we weren't even 1 year into the getting ready to be implemented, and they were already pushing back. And the arguments that were being said to us were, well, we're going to go into foreclosure if Airbnb happens, which is not true, because why would you voluntarily, fall behind and go into foreclosure when there are millions of people, good people, who are looking for housing? This is ridiculous. Some of the other arguments that were brought up were like, well, I use this unit to help pay for my cancer treatments, right? And so this was a really hard kind of moment where it was like, these are real stories where other systems are failing us, like the healthcare system, for example, the education system costing so much money, and people who are genuinely concerned about their retirement income coming to our office being like, this was my plan, and now I don't have it. And so they were very good about the selection of who was being asked to come and advocate, because it is pulling on the heartstrings, right? And who can argue with,
you know, a black woman who's got 2 kids going to college, and she's kind of done it on her own. Like, I can't argue with her. But it's hard to talk about the systemic issues that are failing when someone's bringing that to you. So it was very nefarious. It's quiet right now. It doesn't mean it's dead.
No, it's,
so we have to stay on it.
Clearly. And I think what was interesting is, like, we talked to the folks at the time it was Roar, because, what is that, what does it stand for again?
Something homeowner.
Right, so this was like, it was basically. So the whole thing, was autonomy, but we actually, so they came and like protested our protest, and were very active, and so we had some dialogue. I spent an hour talking to like the 2 women that were leading that group, and showing them where like Airbnb was paying for their campaign and they didn't realize it, or showing them where, why, like, how they were literally just like token like props for Airbnb. Like, we showed them what Airbnb was actually advocating for, which was not what they were advocating for, and they sort of separated. Like, they're not really like.
Yeah, there was a once some of that stuff was made clear, there was a separation, and there are still groups that are genuinely more grassroots that do have these concerns, and we have to figure out like how are these folks able to sustain themselves and stay in New York City at a level of quality of life and comfort that they had planned for. It's not our job to remove that future from them, but it is to solve the housing crisis, right?
And we just on that point, I think that one of the things that we've talked about and that I think needs to be more discussed is like we can come up with actual solutions like taxes on the property, and like things like tenants have one-shot deals. Like, how can we do this for homeowners so that they don't actually fall behind on their mortgage? Like, there are things that the city could be doing that don't entail taking a unit off the market. And so like we have to be able to provide, like actively provide like good policy that is gonna address those things. Although just like with landlords, like, you know, crying about their income or whatever, like these people are all almost across the board better off than any of the tenants that we work with.
Yeah,
So like,
like I said, it's complicated.
It is
right?
complicated, yeah.
And some of the things that we need to fix are like housing court, right? People are like, I don't want to deal with tenants because it takes forever to remove people who can't pay or whatever, and we're not doing what we need to do, you know, in an expedited way for folks. So I want to bring in Leah, from your experience, from the legal perspective, since we're talking a little bit about housing court, where do you see the biggest gaps in protecting tenants from platform-driven displacement?
Tenants is, so one is tenants is the guest, because sometimes you can also have, this is why people try to avoid the over 30 day, because once you're at Airbnb for over 30 days, you're like, hey, actually I'm no longer a hotel guest, I'm a tenant. So there's that, and then also tenants in the surrounding tenants that you look at, but yes, this happens. In fact, let me put you on game. It is not a good idea to have a guest in your home for over 30 days because they can do this too. I have had these lawsuits where I actually had one where someone invited someone in from her church to stay, and they got in an argument, and it was over 30 days, so the guest filed an order of protection against the actual tenant, and it was in a rent-stabilized apartment, and the tenant had to leave her own home. And the guest like had oh yeah, this happened, so don't do this. Anyway, yes, this happened. I have cousins, so I'm like, no, girl, I don't know. You can't stay here. Anyway, so, how to protect tenants from platform-driven? I think, first of all, we need to have, there are laws, yes, and I can get into the laws in a bit, but I think before we get the laws, any laws that need to be pushed, a lot of it is, there's also the education piece around it. And one of the hardest parts of getting any laws passed here, especially dealing with housing, is in New York City in particular, there's a lot of sympathy for landlords because there's a huge, sort of like landlord lobby. And then you have like the face of the landlord is not really like this corporate landlord, it's like a small mom and pop landlord. So for example, if I were to ask this question, I know that this room can answer, can fill in this blank, the quickest way to build wealth is real estate. This is what we're taught, right? And so, no, real estate, invest in real estate. You watch these podcasts or the Breakfast Club or whatever, they're like, invest in real estate. This is like a big thing. And so you have a lot of people, I encounter a lot of people who are low income, low to moderate income, and they are within the groups of tenants who would be negatively impacted, but they're spilling the landlord talking points. They're like, what about the small mom and pop? Or what about this? Because this kind of idea is being pushed of like how you grow and get into the middle class. And so you don't have people who want to do this whole like, actually these are bad ideas. When you have these laws being pushed, a lot of people are actually very neutral about it. Or either neutral would be kind, but most of the people are kind of like just uncomfortable because they almost see tenants as the enemy, including themselves. And then the small mom and pop is like the gold standard, the small mom and pop landlord, even though that is not a major representation of the New York City landlords. So I think one part is education, just educating people about how, first of all, the fact that nearly 70% of New Yorkers are renters, New York City residents are renters. People are out there thinking like half of us own a brownstone, no we don't. And that there are a lot of people getting pushed out. So education first, and then second, laws like putting restrictions on who can rent. I think that's the number one part, but also maybe other types of restrictions to discourage it. And then there's also, kind of like zoning restrictions. There's also, now you might have zoning. You have other laws that might allow like accessory dwelling units, and so just making sure that does not encourage other types of short-term rentals or other setups that would be in the neighborhood of that. So.
Yeah, I think that's right, and we'll have to see how the City of Yes plays out, and all of the promises of enforcement money and money for those agencies that are supposed to be protecting tenants and homeowners, right? We'll have to see if those are delivered upon. Hopefully, a different mayor will do that. I think Esteban touched upon this a little bit, but maybe if you want to offer Leah just any thoughts about the fact that, you did. You talked about, the people who are being pushed forward as the face of landlords are, like the small black and brown folks. And even you might take it up because maybe some of us maybe one day would imagine to own a home, but I certainly can't imagine that. I think most New Yorkers realize they don't have the means. But what are some, if you have any ideas of like effective ways for how we really break down to people who exactly own these properties?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been really effective to explain to people like what exactly is happening. Like for example, when I tell people that brokers were charging like $20,000, $10,000, they're like, when I tell people, because this is how I know, like I was saying before, I can tell that you haven't been apartment hunting in a while. If you were to go out and find a rent stabilized apartment, right, your barrier might be a broker. And the broker would say, I'm charging you extra because this is a rent stabilized apartment. And so you would be paying like, at the very least 15% of the annual rent. And they would say, because I found you a rent stabilized, you can find rent higher, you go whatever. So that's one, I found that just like educating people on the different ways that tenants are marginalized, because exploited, marginalized, because again, there's a whole narrative about how tenants are trying to game the system, tenants are trying to game the system, like everyone, again, you're gonna have to take them to housing court, sort of like what, is being said, like I don't wanna have to go to housing court, tenants, you just need to pay your rent and that's just fine. So I think just providing like a lot of education in the ways that it's not as simple as, oh, people are moving in, because, now you have this rhetoric about squatters. And some of the stories are not actually squatters. These are people who have leases, and their leases they're not squatters. Squatters are like you just came in and took the property. They have a lease, something happened, now their landlord wants to evict them, and now they have like a back and forth with the landlord. That's not like, I just saw an empty property, I came in and I took it over. But when you read in the media, sometimes you see this and you're talking about tenants. So I think, again, like we have to really assess what are the ways that tenants actually need protections, what's actually happening in New York City, and how can we protect them, because there's just a lot. I mean, some of the things I've said you've probably heard as well. When the pandemic happened, okay, in 2020, and there was a moratorium, right? You would not believe like the number. See, the things I talk to people because of the work that I talk to like hundreds of people probably a year, probably thousands, right? And then you get to hear like the public opinion. And there were a lot of people who were like, well, we're talking about moratorium, right? People who, you don't want people in the beginning of COVID to like go out and be homeless. And people are like, well, I myself, I went to my local supermarket and I saw someone buy some steak with their EBT card. I'm like, what does that have to do?
You said we were buying TVs. That was
I saw someone buy lobster with their EBT card, so I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with the moratorium? Well, I just think people are just being so. I'm like, oh my God. And these are not like some like, I live in X state. We're talking about New York City, people of color, moderate income people saying this. So this is why I say we need to have more education and information, because when I talk about tenants' rights, people, there's a lot of framing around it is like, well, why would you be into tenants' rights? You should be talking about homeowner rights. There's even a framing of when some of the laws that we're trying to be passed for tenant protections in New York City. I don't know if people are aware of this. I won't be naming any names, but there were some political rhetoric that was like, this is anti-Black, because you should be focused on homeowners. And I promise, this is literally a thing, right? This is, what I'm like, okay, well, you could do homeowners and tenant protection. Oh, no. These trying to push these laws what this is about is trying to push out Black homeowners.
Right. And take their housing stock.
Right.
Even though so many Black and brown people are tenants, and the majority of New Yorkers are that. But yeah, definitely. I want to kind of pull out some of the lessons. I'm going to give you kind of the last word, but I want to pull out some of the lessons around just like basic organizing. Like, what are the lessons that you're learning about what it really takes to fight back against and have these big victories against big platforms like the Baristas Worker Justice Project? We just did a big one, right? Shutting down the Airbnb situation, that was a big win. So maybe if you want to say kind of like your biggest hindsight, what could we have done differently, and what do we need to do now to keep delivering both those protections? Like, how do we sustain that from attacks, and also how do we go to the next level?
Yeah.
Maybe this is how we do.
Okay.
Microphone, I can hear.
Yeah, so
sorry. Yeah, so I think a lot of our success of our organizing really happened during the pandemic. Just like, I think that was the first time when I think deliveristas were seen as people that actually existed. Because I think before the pandemic, we all order our meals. Like, takeout was like a New Yorker tradition, right? But we never got to think as, who's the person that delivered my meals, or is that person treated with dignity? Like, that wasn't a thing. And I think during the pandemic, there was a huge momentum because these were the only people in the streets, pretty much. And that we used that, I think, momentum to capture and really bring attention to a workforce that needed it desperately protections, because now some of them, when they were working for the restaurants, at least they had labor protections, but now that they're working for this industry, they have none. And we captured that momentum that they had as heroes to make sure that New York was delivering some protections, and I think that set sort of, I think the whole idea that I think for New York City to need to regulate and understand how predatory these companies are. And also incredible organizing. I think and all of you will say we can't organize without organized people. And I think part of our success has been making sure that workers are in the front leading their own campaigns, are speaking about the issues. I think what's very successful, especially is that when workers are in the front speaking and sharing their stories, really combats back the corporate narrative that these companies are building, not just because they have really good PR and they're paying millions in PR, but also they own the data. So they can literally pull out the data and say, that's not true, right? Like the numbers are saying completely a different story. And I think what we did is, of course, industry report, but also like back up with like real human life experiences and stories. And then also like caught them by surprise when we started organizing. They didn't think they really undermined our organizing until we win. And I think the biggest challenge is now that they know that there's a lot of organizing and there is a really progressive city council. And I think they're fighting back by trying to buy some campaigns to make sure that they put people that they know they're going to protect their interests. I think the big challenge has been PR. Still, they pull really strong communication. In ours, I think the big challenge was that we are still a mighty tiny organization. We can't communicate as fast as they can with workers. So on a click, they can literally say minimum pay is going to destroy your job, and that was the narrative that they were using. They divide workers. They even managed to contract some of our leaders and turn them behind the campaign. And their narrative is always divisive, right? Like they want to divide the people. In our industry, they always are looking to divide workers, but they're always trying to divide consumers as well, saying like, oh, your meal is going to be more expensive. You got to pay more. And they're doing the exact same thing with the restaurants, right? What they don't tell you is that they're pocketing money, first of all, for consumers, because I don't know if you have read every time you order, all those fees, they don't even put literally like real what those fees are, but those are fees that they can literally charge you. There's not even consumer protections against these apps. That's like the next fight. And then the other one is they recently won a legislation that increased the fees of the restaurants. So they're making money from the restaurants, from the consumers, while underpaying workers. So they're making millions of dollars, so they have the money to pull really good PR and buy lobbyists. And I think that's the biggest challenge because we have the worker organizing power, but we don't have the resources often to fight back that PR and lobby.
What I'm hearing from you is we need a well-funded,
Yes.
year-round megaphone that none of us can afford. I don't know who's going to fund that, but I definitely think we need that to combat all this terrible narrative that they're able to do instantaneously. Esteban, you want to talk a little bit about lessons learned from organizing, and then
Yeah, I want to sort of bring in the idea that I actually started realizing as I was reading this book is that the tactics that Airbnb and companies like them were using in like 2016 were deployed against the tenant movement in 2019 when you had groups like Small Property Owners of New York, SPONY, or groups that were like, they looked like Airbnb host groups, like they were specifically meant to be a particular demographic that would make mom and pop landlords like the face of red stabilized housing when they're like literally the smallest percentage of like the majority of apartments. And so we were able to win, but man, like the money is just like the kind of money that you're right. Like there's, the Airbnb can literally throw $1 million at like a random group and just like do ads and lobby and create a whole narrative that people really did start to like like we heard, for some reason TVs was a thing that everyone thought that, like we were just not paying our rent because we were buying TVs during the pandemic. That's what tenants, yeah, and lattes, yes. But I also think it's important that I think the education that has to happen is like, we have to show people how exploitative landlording is, like just in itself, like you're hoarding a resource that's a necessity for a human being. I don't have any problem with there not being landlords, and that's literally what I will fight the rest of my life for, you know? So like, that's gonna sound radical to a lot of people, but honestly, if we're gonna actually decommodify housing and make it something that's for the benefit of New Yorkers, like, you can't start at a place that's like, well, you know, homeownership is the best thing. Like, it's not. Like, as a New Yorker, it's not. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it should be okay to be a renter. And so, you know, there's a lot of the narrative that we've been, you know, spent here with Timothy and folks at Housing Justice for All have spent like years trying to develop, is now sort of really helping with this other, you know, campaign and being able to understand why these tactics are, you know, work the way that they do. So I think in terms of organizing, no matter what, tenants are always going to, and workers are always going to feel like a more real group. Like when landlords get up and talk, there's a hollowness to the dialogue, because there's things that you can see are not, they're just not real. I think we have an advantage, even when it comes to like lobbying elected officials. Like, there's just more of us. I mean, like if tenants were activated across, for example, in Crown Heights, if like all the tenants in Crown Heights, or like the smallest percentage of the tenants in Crown Heights were as loud as these like handful of homeowners, there would be, it would be a tremendous, it would make a tremendous difference. And we're working towards that, but it's hard. And like before you got here today, I was talking about how this group, Homeowners for Financial Empowerment, are doing these like, it's an Airbnb group, and they're like creating little like pockets of support in Brooklyn. And to hear them talk about it, it's just like, all you have to do is go talk to your council member, and like, some of them are waiting to hear from you so that they can have the go-ahead to pursue this legislation, right? And it's like, you know,
elections matter.
Yeah, they do. And so, you know, I think the work ahead, well, in terms of Airbnb, like literally the work is between now and December, because they really want to make something happen before a new mayor comes in, before you know, some of the support that they have, in particular the speaker, are gone. And so like, I think we have to be really vigilant. I think the main thing that I'm learning out of all of this is, like, you can't just win stuff. Like, in 2019 we won, but like, we maybe didn't do all the work that we needed to do to implement the rent laws and to defend them in the way that we should have. The defending and implementing is so much harder than like the sexy win, and like that's where we are now with all of
these. It's
these.
gotta be sustained. Like,
Yeah.
You have to have folks that are like on it all the time and maintain relationships with the people in power that can help fight back. Thank you so much for that. Just being mindful of time. Luke, I didn't mean to skip over you. I wasn't sure. I walked in late, so I wasn't sure. But I want to, I mean, especially right now in the federal context where it just feels like whoever can pay to play gets to play and gets to do whatever they want. And I guess, you know, you're looking at places all over. What is one city we should be looking at? You know, if we're not kind of like continuing to intervene, you know, where are we in the next 5 years, going up against these companies?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I mean, I think like New York feels like it's actually in a very good place compared to some cities at the moment. Obviously, it's kind of like a crunch moment from the sounds of it in the next like three months or so. I think I saw something that said Airbnb are the biggest donors, biggest spenders in this election. They put a lot of money into the Cuomo campaign already. But it feels like the local RI team is pretty good, and that it's actually reduced numbers of listings. And the kind of pattern globally is that regulations just sort of starting to catch up and enforce like the laws that do exist. So generally speaking, like if you look at like the levels of listings like in different cities, it's like they're leveling off as regulation starts to bite in places like Amsterdam, Berlin, Barcelona, New Orleans, I think, Toronto, and others. So there's a kind of, it feels like actually we're still in quite an early moment of like regulation and dealing with the crisis of Airbnb, which is actually, it's also the total number of like listings that there are in cities. And there's places, I just come directly from Mexico City, where 2 weeks before I spoke, 19 families had been violently evicted illegally onto the street by a landlord who's been turning local buildings into just entire Airbnbs. But what these 19 families did was they occupied the street next to the building, and everyone's been bringing them food, and the local housing movement, which really took off in Mexico City over the summer, has been organising with them. And I think they just got a win 2 days ago that the city council were taking this landlord's because they think they're pretty sure that it's an illegal eviction. They're looking into the landlord and trying to work out who this person is, because there's a strong suspicion that he doesn't actually own the building even. But so there's this kind of sense that in the places where Airbnb has really started to become very visible in the way that you're describing in Brooklyn, that people are getting much better organised in terms of like their visibility as well, and the housing movements sort of reached a kind of a point where actually it's only in the last kind of 3 or 4 years that we've seen that tail off in like rises in listings. So maybe listings aren't going up everywhere anymore. But it's not that, I suppose it doesn't sound that positive, but it's kind of, I think it's slow, like collective action is very slow in kind of having the impact that it needs to have. But the movements are kind of stronger than they ever have been in terms of fighting tech. The last 10 years, the conversation's completely changed. And we now kind of have data about things like the effects of Airbnb on rents and on gentrification. We have data on how much Uber drivers are being paid now. So while if you spoke to an Uber driver 10 years ago, it actually felt like, wow, this is a win-win situation. I'm having a cheap ride and they're being paid better than what the work they were doing for a taxi company or previously. But that's that's changed in the last 10 years. Algorithmic pricing has meant that the average Uber or Lyft driver or courier is now earning way below minimum wage, because exactly as Leah was saying, or it might be with you, you're not getting paid for the wait time, and the wait times are going up and up because there's more and more drivers on the streets, there's more and more couriers. It's heavily incentivized the process of becoming a worker for one of these platforms. So we know more than we ever have. The movements are stronger than they have been. The challenges and the regulation are we kind of know what we need to do now. I think like the kinds of regulation that works, platform accountability, asking them for data, legally mandating that they give you that data. So I think looking at cities like New York City, Barcelona, Berlin, Amsterdam, Toronto, and others, we can start to kind of build a picture of like how you do it. And once we have that, we've got a playbook of how platforms try and organise and do their thing. We're in a much stronger position to kind of make kind of regain control over housing, kind of working conditions of the people affected and so on. So I should stop speaking because we're running out of time. I have to catch a flight.
Yes, so I'm going to open it up for a few questions.
I want to ask a question. Can I ask a question?
Okay, so I did see King Can first.
Yeah.
Steve, Chris.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So thank you all for being here. Shout out to Esteban. My name is Tiffany Khan. I'm a board member of the Met Council on Housing, and we recently awarded you one of the Jane Awards to Leah Goodridge. Thank you also for the many years of extraordinary work you've been doing. I wear many hats. Besides being a community board member, or formerly a community board member, besides being also strongly in the tenant movement with the Met Council and so on and so forth, I'm also a former city council candidate. And I live right across the street. And I wanted to add another dimension to how this impacts every single person in this room, which is through campaign finance, which was touched on, but this is an unprecedented year. This is the first time we have had so much money poured into the city council races by these IEs, that's independent expenditure, which is basically a super PAC. And you all remember when Bernie Sanders was talking about, I don't have a super PAC. Never thought that what's happening at the federal level would touch on so many of these micro niche races. But this is what we are facing. We have, anybody walked through public housing, NYCHA, recently? Yeah. You live there. So you know what I'm talking about. People don't trust their neighbors, let alone government, let alone some stranger knocking on their door to get a signature. So when I have senior citizens who take their $25 to donate to my campaign and then volunteer on my campaign, that says a lot, right? So what these companies are doing is they're greatly diminishing not only this hard-earned fixed income, but they're also greatly diminishing their votes, right? Because you got an opponent who gets hundreds of thousands of dollars from Uber, Doordash, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I'm being audited for $10 donations from a senior citizen, for example, who forgot to tick a box on a form. So what I would love to propose in the city council is any candidate who is getting who's getting money from these companies should not then take taxpayer money to get matching funds. So that's one solution. And one other thing I have to say.
It's third time, because it's leaving exactly 15 minutes.
Yes.
And you have a question for the panel.
Yeah. Housing shortage? Really? Or warehousing? There you go. Especially NYCHA, over 8,000 units.
Just in NYCHA alone.
You did mention warehousing.
Yeah. I do think that we have a housing shortage. I think both things are true. There are apartments that landlords are keeping in the market, which we have actively been trying to get back on the market. And then there are also apartments that are being kept off, or were apartments that were being kept off with Airbnb. And then in addition to that, the justification for much of the action for why we're pushing for both the Airbnb units to be back on and for the warehousing is that we have a housing shortage, right? It isn't that, oh, like I said before, you could go and apply for an apartment and you could just get one and then that's it. I mean, we see it. We literally see the supply and demand issue when you're trying to look for an apartment. Even you mentioned NYCHA. Even NYCHA, I've had clients, when I first started, I remember telling a client, oh yeah, you applied for NYCHA and then, maybe it might take a year. And she laughed. Why? Because I was green and naive and didn't understand that it's going to take a decade sometimes. And even when you live at NYCHA, you're just trying to get a transfer, that too can take literally years. Not 1 year, 2 years, years. So I think that both things are true, which is that we have a housing shortage and also we have an issue with landlords warehousing apartments, and we needed to have those Airbnb units back on the market.
Oh, sorry. Hi panel. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson from Brooklyn. I want to know, how do we identify the worker groups? Because I want to know from both the council member and a few of the panelists about this organization that was out here this morning that was called Justice for App Workers and IDG. How do we identify which are the bro groups and what the worker groups that are funded by the apps. How do we identify those?
So, so I don't know the specific group, but you do touch, oh, do you, yeah, go ahead.
So, it's an interesting one because they're doing it in all the other states as well. So IBG was actually, it was a union for rideshare workers that was formed by the company. So the company decided that they were going to unionize workers on their own terms. So, which that means is that this company union gets a lot of millions of dollars. They get, I don't know if it's like 5 cents, 10 cents from the consumer. So IDG has tons of money to build like a really aggressive organizing campaign, but they don't because they're funded by the company. And technically, they have formed an agreement with the company to, it's almost as if they hire a worker organization to control a workforce to say, you've got to only fight for these things under our terms. So IDG has been fully funded by the company for many years. However, IDG, aside from the fact that they get millions of dollars, they have been, I think, in an effort to try to legitimize themselves in the movement as the worker organization. And a lot of worker organizations like the Taxi Workers Alliance, others, are very critics of the fact that how you can be running and pretending to be a workers' rights organization when they have millions of dollars to have expanded labor protections for workers, build a really worker union that can really build power to confront the companies. And because their failure to really represent workers, you have worker organizations like ours, like the Taxi Workers Alliance, trying to regulate an industry who has bought a worker organization and built to try to prevent regulation. So
the same also happened in the sanitation workforce. The private party companies were starting their own unions, we call them sham unions.
Yeah. And they're trying, they built a new campaign since they, like the movement knows already as IDG, they formed what is it called, Act for Justice, which is run by the company union. And their goal, right now they're trying to get buy-in, they don't really organize the workers, but they're trying to organize because their goal is to pass a legislation at the state level so they can bring in the delivery workers into their sham union as well. And their goal is, I mean, they get like, I think 5 cents per delivery. Every time that a rideshare makes a trip, they get 5 cents. So they got a lot of money, but
just because we're coming on time, I didn't see any other questions. If you could each say, like, in a brief thing, like, what's one thing that folks in this room can do tomorrow to be supportive of these movements and fighting back?
I think one major thing is you can get on your community board, but the most important thing is to advocate directly with the mayor. I think one of the things I've been surprised about is, there's a lot of grassroots movement, but I've been really surprised at how organized, like the landlords are playing checkers, but the developers are playing chess. And so I think one of the things that surprised me was just how organized a lot of them are speaking directly. The mayor's office, sometimes they have like nonprofits, and you might look at the title and think, oh, this is like a tenant advocacy group, and it's not. It's like a developer arm, like advocacy group. And there's a really great book about this. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing it. I'm so sorry.
So what I heard was, yes, join your community board and talk to the mayor. I'm so sorry. Hopefully the new mayor, but you should still talk to the one who's like, he does his job. I felt this where. Yeah. No, you're fine.
But tell us the name of the book.
Thank you.
Diminished Democracy. It's an amazing book.
Sorry, I share a lot of hearing, so I know how to. I know when it's coming. Like, I share the story. Okay, go ahead.
So at baseline, make sure you have a tenant association in your building.
Union.
Join the wider tenant union.
Association, union.
That too.
No.
And.
tenant association and union, if you have it.
Granite Tenant Union was the first tenant union to come to New York since the 70s, so I know a lot about tenant unions. Join your local tenant union, join the wider tenant movement, and in terms of Airbnb, report stuff that you're seeing and talk to your council member because they really do need to hear from you. Sometimes it is as simple as like, how many constituents show up? How many constituents write down their name even when they're not there? I'm assuming these things actually matter. So yeah, just like join. There's so much work to be done, and it can be as simple as knocking on your neighbor's door, or as complicated as trying to get an appointment with a council member. Whatever it takes, you can do something, and it will make a difference.
I was going to say something about what's happening next after the talks that I've been given in different cities. So we're having a meeting in October online where, like, hopefully most of the panel members across all the different cities, where we've talked about lots of different technology platforms and in cities which have got totally different kinds of experiences of trying to pass regulation around them. But that'll be happening in October, and we'll put it through the Eventbrite if you sign up to the Eventbrite. If you're on the mailing list for any of the organisations that are represented here, we'll hopefully be able to put that information out to you. So if you'd like to carry on discussing this stuff and the kind of, like what we can learn from other cities and vice versa, that'll be really great. Thank you.
Just one thing, join the Consumer Delivering Justice.org mailing list. You are consumers, Doordash, Uber, and they care a lot about you. And so we have that campaign that we've been launching. It's going to get exciting stuff. So join Consumers Delivering Justice.org.
And I'll just underscore, or I'll just double down on the reach out to your council member. I think you'd be surprised how even 5 people showing up being like, we want to talk. Like, we're very sensitive to that. I mean, it's just like, or if like suddenly 100 people start emailing your office, you're like, what the hell is going on today? Like, what is this? What's this issue? Okay, like we gotta stop a little bit of the day and address it. Calls, I mean, at least for our office, if 5 people show up and they're like, we have an issue, it's kind of like, oh, like, okay, to like address it, because it's not an everyday occurrence. Most people walk in the door needing all sorts of assistance, but when they have a demand, it actually is like, it really pierces through. So definitely do that. So I want to thank you all for your time and labor, and your positivity, and your fight back energy. We really appreciate you all, and thank you everybody who has come here and spent this evening. Was it Monday? Yeah. We're coming out on Monday to talk about this stuff. You all are real champions, real warriors.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Councilmember Nurse for moderating. Thank you for, I think you're mostly Brooklyn panelists for showing up. 3 quick things. Luke came all the way from Manchester, so yeah. I was about to go take advantage of that. We are supporting some of the fundraising to support the People Not Platform tour. If you have a few bucks, we do have a QR code up here that you can scan. If you'd like to get involved with Tenants Not Tourists, definitely feel free to come talk to us after. We have a sign-up sheet. We would love to keep you guys involved. We're going to have fun rallies to make sure that our council members hear us. And I think to continue to organize in ways that I think can really protect our neighborhoods. I want to reiterate, like, I think for a lot of us, like, we use these platforms. Like, don't get me wrong, I am very guilty for taking an Uber when it's late at night. But I think there are ways that we can do it that can support workers, can support tenants, and can, I think do better within our communities. And then finally, oh yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Katie, for supporting us. And thanks, Timothy. You guys are a real OG educating guys.
Is there also for this book a little discount code if folks want to support the labor and the writing behind this book? You can have some up here.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. Have a great night.
I'm out. So that's it, New York City, and I'm done. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys. I'm gonna leave the college. So. Yep. Leaving the college. I gotta head home. Time now is currently 7:58. Good. Thank you. Exit this one?
What's that?
Exit, right?
It's right here.
All right, thank you. Perfect. Thank you. And it's 8 o'clock now. All right, enjoy your night. Take care. Later.